Hey everybody, it's Albert, and I got an email today from someone asking me if I knew anything about this thing concerning the Gospel of Barnabas. For those of you, I've done a video on the Gospel of Barnabas in the past. It's known to be a medieval text constructed by some Islamic apologist or supporter or for polemical purposes. It was a gospel in which the coming of Muhammad is predicted. And everyone pretty much agrees this is, like a medieval invention. Now, there are some scholars, I will point out, who think that it was based on an earlier text and all the Muhammad stuff was thrown in because it just doesn't, it appears in all different places where it really doesn't have any business being. And it appears to be not quite match the rest of the text. And so the theory is this may have been an earlier gospel by some group such as the Ebionites or something like that, and it was embellished, that it was originally written in Syriac, which is a form of Aramaic, and then this was embellished by later Muslim apologists for polemical purposes. It first appears apparently in, I believe it's in Spain, medieval Spain, during the Moorish era, by someone who had converted from Christianity to Islam and I think translated into Latin or something. But it is obviously not a legitimate document from prior to the time of Muhammad. Now there is a reference in some early Christian texts of a Gospel of Barnabas, but there's no evidence at all that this is the same text. There were lots of things written under the name Barnabas and various other apostles at different periods of time. Now, some, as I said, have speculated maybe this was an embellishment of that earlier document, but who knows? There's really no guarantee one way or the other if that earlier document mentioned has anything to do with this one. So that's just speculation, since nothing's quoted from that earlier document. It's only mentioned. So that would be, but there's no way that the one that we have, the one that's being promoted, is in fact from that early period. Now, it turns out that there is this rumor going around that there's this ancient Bible they found in Turkey, apparently got from smugglers trying to take it out of the country, and it supposedly has in it the Gospel of Barnabas, and it dates from the year 500 AD, and they've got pictures of it they put on display. Now, I want to point out, the Turkish authorities, as far as I can tell, have said nothing about this at all. They merely point out they got this ancient Bible from smugglers, and as far as I can tell, there's nothing about it. Someone then alleged that it contained a copy of the Gospel of Barnabas, but I'm not even sure. There may be confusion there, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But no one's actually ever seen anything in this text that is the Gospel of Barnabas, as a matter of fact. No one's seen anything at all of the Gospel of Barnabas in this text, as far as I can tell, from the people who've actually had the document, whatever this Bible is. And none of them have said it's from the year 500 either. So it's a very old Bible, and it's apparently worth a lot of money. But what it is, if it's legitimate, if it's, and considering it wasn't found in situ, it was found among people doing, less than, well, let's just say shady transactions. There's always a possibility it's a forgery. A lot of that stuff happens. But now, I don't consider myself any expert on Aramaic or Syriac, in this case, but immediately some things come to mind. The fact that, one, we haven't seen, no one's really said anything about the Gospel of Barnabas officially being in it, or and even if it were, is that Gospel of Barnabas the same one? Does it, or any mention of the name Muhammad in it, etc., etc., etc. None of that. We've seen none of that. However, there are a few things that come to mind once I actually saw the text itself, and then a few puzzling things. Now, I want to point out, this isn't the first time I've heard something like this. I ran into some Muslim apologists, I still run into them occasionally, who will tell me that the Gospel of Barnabas is in the famous Codex Sinaiticus, also known as Codex Aleph, which is a 4th century codicy. The problem with that is that, in fact, what they're talking about is the Epistle of Barnabas, which has absolutely nothing to do with this. It's totally different. Never mentions Muhammad. It has nothing to do, but somehow they see the word Barnabas or the name Barnabas, and somehow they attached it to made it to God. And that's just how these rumors get started. And that appears on a number of Islamic websites, that the Epistle of Barnabas, or the Codex, they see the Gospel of Barnabas is in Codex Sinaiticus. In fact, it's the Epistle of Barnabas, which has nothing to do with that, and totally different document. So that immediately tells you that to put up the alarms on this one. But there's more, and I'll point you to a number. I'll have a number of links, because this thing actually first circulated a couple of months ago. Now apparently, because it's in WorldNet Daily, it's going to get a lot more attention. And first of all, with WorldNet Daily, that's where I heard it, where this person heard from about it. WorldNet Daily is kind of like, how would I put it, the conservative answer to the National Enquirer. There's a reason some people have given it the name World Nut Daily, and it's not because I'm not saying this because it's conservative, because I'm conservative, but the fact that it's a conspiracy theorist rag. There's the whole thing is just like they're one of the big supporters of the Obama birther thing and all that kind of stuff. So I tend to take what's on there with a grain of salt, but apparently they're just repeating something said in an Iranian news service, which even raises more alarm bells. And I get the feeling that the Iranian news service is reporting these rumors that have been going around that are based on absolutely nothing. But let's talk about it, whether or not, we don't know if the Gospel of Barnabas is in this or not. Okay, nobody's seen it, as far as I can tell. But immediately, I'm looking at this and going, this really isn't the 500 AD. Apparently, some people have alleged that there's a date on the cover of it that says it's from 500 AD, and apparently the expression is on there, something akin to the year of our Lord. Problem with it being 500 immediately comes to mind, even before I look at the thing, is that that dating system that says, the year 1500, the year 500, whatever, isn't invented until 525. Dionysius Aegius or something, I forget the guy's name, but there was a monk who in 525 AD, you see what had happened was the Emperor Diocletian had come up with a new year, like they used to say this such and such a year of the emperor such and such, and Diocletian just basically said, from the beginning of my reign will be the year 1, and then everything below that will be 5 years or 10 years or 100 years before me and after me, and that had continued. They used those numbers, but this monk said we shouldn't be celebrating a guy who was basically a persecutor of Christians, so we should celebrate it from the time of Jesus. And granted, his calculations were wrong, but that's basically was the idea. So they're using this system, but that system doesn't come into play until 525 AD. And even then, it took a while, of course, for it to catch on, and to get to, a place where they're writing in Aramaic in Edessa or in somewhere in what would have been at that point the Persian Empire, which probably had their own. 500. It doesn't sound real plausible. It probably didn't spread there until many centuries later. So that right away tells you there's something's wrong. Second thing, is once I look at the picture, you can see clearly on the cover of this Bible the diacritical marks. If you're familiar to in Hebrew, in Aramaic, and Arabic, they'll have marks for certain vowel sounds and consonant lengths and things like that. That doesn't come into play until many centuries after 500 AD. So that can't be 500 AD. And then there are people who know Aramaic, and I've contacted someone and had them look at it. It says very clearly the year 1500, not 500. So this, if it even contains the Gospel of Barnabas, is actually later than when we know this Gospel was first introduced into the West. So if it even contains it. So I'm calling BS on this one until I see anything differently. But I'll put a couple links and you can go take a look yourself, and that's pretty much all I got to say on it. Thank you very much for your time.